I'm beginning.
It's time?
It's time.
John?
Yes.
We love you.
Thank you. I'm really amazed at the turnout. There's about, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's about maybe 12, 13 more people here than I thought there'd be. For the last presentation. I'm going to talk about Apache. Primarily, well, not primarily, exclusively for Unix. I'm going to talk about 1.3 and 2.0. I need to know what the level of expertise is. How many of you have built your own software from source code?
Any software?
Any software from source. Okay, a few. There are a few that haven't, though. Good. And most of my slides won't be wasted. We spend a lot on I'm trying to get people over the fear of building their own software. Let's see if this works. Okay, first of all, why Apache? There are a lot of web servers out there. In my opinion, it is the best web server. It's not the fastest. There are faster web servers. There's that new Tux for Linux, which is built into the kernel, which is incredibly fast. AOL server, if you saw Elmer's presentation, AOL server has really good database links for what it wants to do. But Apache is very stable. Apache is extensible. There are people working on modules for Apache all over the world. It's got the largest user base of any open source project, and, well, except for Linux. And it has the largest share of the market right now. The most recent Netcraft survey, 62% of all web servers are running Apache. And 61% of all production site servers, the ones that actually have something behind them, are running Apache. Microsoft Internet Explorer Internet Information Server is the next highest, and it's only at 21%. It's increasing, but it's still at only 21%. And Netscape Enterprise is third at 6%. The other reasons why I like Apache, it's open source. Open source software this is a religious issue. Open source software is, for me, a religious issue and is very important. And it's not made by Microsoft, which means I don't pay them money. How can you get Apache? 3 different methods. You can get a binary package, you can get an RPM, or you can build it from source. We'll go over what each of those are in just a second. And you get them all from the same place, www.apache.org, and they have mirrors around the world. Whatever's easiest to get to. It's easy to install. If you're, I should start with a binary package. That's where you find out what your, whatever platform you're working on. You go to the site, you get the binary specifically for your site. You download it, you put it where they tell you to put it, and it runs. It's the easiest way to do it. It's prefab. Someone else has gone all the trouble of figuring out what should be in it. Of course, the downside is that somebody else has gone through it and decided what would go in it. It's compiled for your specific operating system. You have to make sure you get the right package for your system. If you're off by even a little bit, it can be dangerous. And if you can't find one for your system, you really do have to find another method to do it. Okay. Because they're pre-configured, you don't have a lot of flexibility about where things are put or what modules are included. And the binaries are almost always 2 versions behind. So the latest fixes and stuff aren't going to be in them. And enhancements. Okay, RPMs is probably the most popular. Yes, Dom.
How hard is it to put the fixes and put patches in? If they're 2 years behind, because I mean, like NT sometimes you install a patch and they say don't because it'll break.
Well, the binary, you just reinstall the binary. And when they come out with the new binary, you just reinstall it and copy it over it. And hopefully everything will work fine. Red Hat packages, RPMs, that other versions of Unix use RPMs. It's very similar to a binary package. It's usually more up to date. And it's specific for your particular Linux operating system. However, SUSE puts things in one place. Red Hat puts things in another place. Caldera puts things all over the place. It depends on which one you're using. RPMs are pretty easy to use. I've used them for a lot of things. I don't use them for Apache because I like to configure Apache specifically for what I want to do. So I build it from source. So if you're going to build it, which one should you build? There are two versions out there: 1.3.20 and 2.0.16. I think 16 or 18. I think it's 16, which is the beta version, the first beta version of 2.0. 1.3 is stable, tested, and I've been using it for quite some time. It's rock solid. It doesn't go down. It works perfectly. I have it on all my production sites. 2.0 has many advantages and one major disadvantage. Advantages are you've got multi-threading support. Now, for people running Linux, that doesn't matter. I run Solaris on my production sites. Solaris needs threading in a big way. On Linux, threads and processes are the same thing, so it doesn't really matter. Build from source, it's the best way. It's not as hard as you think. 3 simple commands, which I'll show you in a minute. It can be more complex if you want to specify what modules you want built and where you want them put. But again, this is not hard to do. Most of the packages, especially Apache, have really laid it out in the install documents exactly how to go about doing it. It's really not that hard. First thing you do is you get the gzip tarball from Apache, and we'll give it a whirl. My slides are out of order. I apologize for that. 1.3 or 2.0. The 2.0 advantage is one of the major advantages is you can filter input and output. It means is you've got, one of the things we've always wanted to do, we have CGI scripts that produce code, produce pages. We want to include server-side includes. With 1.3, you can't do that. A module can grab, one module gets a choice at what you're doing. You can't take the output of one module and feed it through another module. With 2.0, you can do that, which is really, really nice. The only thing I can think of doing it right now is to run CGI scripts through mod SSI. But I'm sure there are others coming up there. In fact, there's several people are working extensively on writing filters. Should be able to do a lot of mod rewrite stuff. Will become suddenly much, much more interesting. 2.0 also has full SSL support. Prior to that, you used to have to buy a different server, a different port of Apache that you had to pay for to get full SSL. It uses a new OS independent layer called the Apache Portable Runtime, which means it should be able to be used on more platforms. Apache isn't just for UNIX. It's for BLS. It's for NT. It's for, I think you can even run it on 95. I don't know why on earth you would ever want to, but you could. Its major disadvantage of 2.0 is that it's not stable. It's beta. Most of the modules haven't been rewritten, and the installation documentation is not there yet. It's partially there, but the really easy installation stuff isn't there. This is the first release where you didn't have to build it from the code repository, which was a treat. Let me tell you, 2.0.14 was just, I spent hours trying to get that thing to work, and it didn't in the end. So it's nice that they've finally got it different. Okay, let's go with the installation process. For 1.3, there are 2 methods of doing it. How many of you have ever used AutoConf to install something? A couple. AutoConf is a Unix installation tool. It automates the installation process. It's very useful. Apache didn't have it until 2.0. For 1.3, they made up something they called, it was AutoConf-like. In fact, APACI stands for Apache AutoConf Interface, or AutoConf-like interface. The other way is there was a text file that you could edit that as it built the software. That's not a fun process, and it's not trivial. But the APACI method of doing it basically automated the writing of that one file, so it made it a lot easier. For 2.0, Apache decided that they didn't want to keep developing their own system, so they switched over to completely to AutoConf. I'm having real trouble making AutoConf work with Apache. There's some things that I expect it to do that it won't do, and I haven't figured out how to do it yet. When I get back, I'm going to be working on it on my Sunbox to try and get it to work. Okay, when you build, you can build lots and lots of modules. Modules are the key to the success of Apache. There are dozens of modules. These are just, well, these are actually, there's this and another page have pretty much all of them. You can, alias for doing aliases, mod CGI for making CGI processes a part of Apache itself. Mod rewrites URLs, and you can use regular expressions to rewrite URLs. So you can search somebody coming into your. This is really useful if you've got a site that's changed and you've got people who have hard-coded URLs to you. So where you've got, well, I think LII is the biggest example I can think of. They've been putting up US code for years. They've changed where things are. Rather than have to contact everybody who had a link to them, or have everyone who had a link to them's link be broken, they put in rewrite rules. So that if something came in on the old, it would apply a rewrite rule to it and give it the new URL transparently to the user. It's really, really useful. One of these days we're going to do a session just on mod rewrite. Some of the other ones that are useful. My favorite is mod spelling, which is of course misspelled. Mod spelling corrects URLs. And you type in a URL, and if you've got it off, it'll try to guess to see if there's an easy one to do. Mod user track, if you're tracking users, can be really useful. Stuff like that. Okay. Let's have to decide what you're going to build when you're building. What modules you're going to put in. What stuff that's not in the Apache core distribution. Those are the modules that we just saw. There are other modules out there. There's PHP, modPerl, which is a Perl interface to Apache. It makes if you're not running modPerl and you're running Apache and you use a Perl CGI script, when you call that CGI script, it has to fire up Perl. And that's overhead. With modPerl, Perl's already running. It just sends it over to it. It's much faster, much lower overhead. The same with the PHP module. Just makes it so much easier. MySQL for using the MySQL database. Postgres, AOL server. Elmer has walked out. You can. He uses AOL server with TeknoidFestV.net. You can use Apache if you incorporate the AOL module in it, the AOL server module. The rest of his system, the rest of Ars Digita's system, thinks it's dealing with AOL server. It's a little bit slower than AOL server, but if you got a lot slower than AOL server. Well, it's a little bit slower than AOL server. Okay, one of the other things you have to decide is how you're going to build your modules. Are you going to build them as dynamic shared objects or as static objects? It's a trade-off. DSOs make Apache much more flexible at runtime. Which means if you've got a server out there that you're switching between two different configurations a lot, either you're running it with SSL or you're not running it with SSL, or you're throwing a module in or out. If you don't use dynamic shared objects, you have to recompile the server each time. If you're using dynamic shared objects, you just change the configuration file and restart the server. So if you're switching configurations, it's a lot easier. It also allows you, if you've got Apache up and running and you've got, say, you were using PHP 3 and you're using it as a dynamic shared object. PHP 4 came out. You could get PHP 4, compile it, install it into your already existing Apache installation without having to reconfigure Apache. Now, with PHP and modPerl, which change versions a lot, comes in real handy. DSOs have a downside. They make Apache 20% slower on startup. That's not that big a deal, though, because you don't start Apache that often. I think the last time I rebooted Apache on my Sunbox was January. And that was because somebody unplugged it. We have a cleaning staff who decided to unplug the things to plug in there, cleaning equipment. It was a lot of fun. It also makes execution time slower on some platforms. And I think AIX is slower. I'm not sure what the other ones are. It's not slower on Linux, and it's not slower on Solaris. I put all of mine as DSOs just because I could, and I haven't noticed any problem with execution speed. Okay, before we actually configure it, let's talk a little bit about how you configure from source, how you build something from source. The general way when you're using autoconf or an autoconf-like interface is you change into the directory after you get your tarball and you've untarred it and you've unzipped it and untarred it, so you have a source directory to work with. You have a source tree of code. You go to the root of that source code tree, and you type /configure and then a bunch of options. Once that's done, that builds the configuration. You type make, which makes the actual binary. Make test some use make test, some don't. If it uses make test, it tests it to make sure that the binary was built correctly. And make install installs it where you need it to go. It's that simple. It's not hard to do. If you don't know what the various options are for your particular package you're installing, you do /configure --help, and it lists everything you need in a more or less useful way. Let's see. What I mean when I say grab the tarball, gunzip it, and guntar it. You all know, does anybody here not know what a tarball is? Okay, good, then I don't have to go through all this. This is the code you use to untar it and ungzip it on a Linux box. tar-xvszf some tarball.tar.gz. That will create your source tree for you. It's real simple. Oh, and you guys don't, if anybody is taking notes, you don't need to. This is all going to be up on the CALI website whenever Steve gets around. Whenever I get it to Steve and he gets it up there. Okay, let's install 1320. We're going to roll it around, so we're going to use the APA-CI method, and we're going to install PHP 4, modPerl, and MySQL. Actually, I took the MySQL slides out without taking that off. Forget the MySQL. First, get the tarball, put it someplace logical, like user local source, and change into that directory. Run the tar command. Expands it into user local source Apache _1.3.20. Pretty basic. I'm missing slides. Oh well. So you've got your source tree built. By doing that, we'll add in modPerl next. You have to. A lot of these things you have to do when you're building Apache with some of these modules. You have to unload the Apache tree, so you've got it there, and then you run the other things against it. This will put something into the Apache tree, so that when you finally do make Apache, it will work. So you get the most recent version of modPerl, which at this point is 1.24. Untar it, it puts it in a source directory. This one you run a little differently because it's a Perl file. You use Perl to make it. Perl makefile.pl, Apache source equals user local Apache source. This part right here is where you just installed your Apache tree. You're telling it where to find Apache. And you tell it to go to the source directory because in that directory, when Apache untars into this directory, it creates a source directory, and that's where it actually puts the source code. So you're telling it where to put the source code. You're telling it to do HTTPD1, because you want modPerl to actually go and run in Apache. You want to use the APA-CI method, and you want everything to happen. Don't ask what everything is. It's just good to know that you should run everything. Run make test, run make install. That installs the module into the Apache tree, and when Apache is made, it will make the module. zlib is a directory I always put in whenever I put in PHP. It's a shared library of Z compression tools. I use a lot of stuff in PHP that compresses things and uncompresses things, so I always put it in. I think it's generally recommended that you do so when you build PHP. Simple, you get the source, which is 1.13, untar it, run /configure, make test, make install. That puts it in user local lib. Finally, we get to build Apache. You used to have to build a PHP before you, like we just did with modPerl, but with PHP 4 you do it after. For anybody who's done this in a version prior, it's a little bit different. Get the tarball, untar it. This is the command you run in Apache, the configuration command. /configure, prefix equals user local Apache. You can change that to whatever you want. The default for Apache 1.3, the default directory is user local Apache. This is a standard one. Different people may want it in different places. Different Linux distributions put it in little different places. Solaris wants to put it in the opt directory, which, if you're smart, you override. Enable module most. Now you could go through your list, put an enable module equals, and then the name of the module command for every module in the core of Apache. All those 2 pages that we had, 2 slides of modules. They put a nice little shortcut, which is most. What most does is it loads all the modules that are stable. It leaves out the experimental ones. Trust me, you don't want to run the experimental ones if you can avoid it. Enable shared equals max says any of those modules that can be run as a DSO, run it as a DSO. You can choose not to do that if you want. And then because we put in, remember we put Perl in, just the last step, we put modPerl in, here's where you activate that module. Activate module equals source modules perl libperl.a. That's the module source code that was put into the Apache source tree in the last step. Then you run make and make install. Now you get to do PHP. Do the same thing, untar it. The configuration file or the configuration command for PHP is a little different for PHP 4 than it was for PHP 3. So if you install PHP 3 and haven't done 4 yet, you'll find it's a little bit different. They want you to use APXS, which is the module installation tool for Apache. So you put -- with -APXS. I've got MySQL already in there, so I put with MySQL. You tell it where MySQL is found. Because I put zlib in, I tell it where zlib is found. And actually, you don't have to put the equals user local lib for zlib. That's the default. So I put it there just to show you that you could put a path there. I enable track variables because I like to track users using PHP. And this does it quite nicely. I also like magic quotes because it makes my life simpler. Then you run make install. Now for the final steps. You have now made the binary, and the binary is installed. The Apache binary is installed with all the modules. Now you need to edit the conf file, the httpd conf file. It's the main file that has all of the Apache runtime configuration commands in it. You want to make sure that load module, PHP 4 module, this line basically, was added. It should have been added by the PHP when you install PHP using APXS. It's always a good idea to check because sometimes it can screw it up. You also need to add this add module line, and I'll show you. Actually, I'm going to take a look at the file in a little bit, and I'll show you where these go. Put an add module in, tells it to use PHP 4. You also have to add a MIME type. If you're going to be sending PHP files across, it has to know what MIME type it is. So you add type application x httpd-php. That's the MIME type. You change to the user local Apache directory, and you type /sbin Apache control start. That's all it takes. Your Apache server is now up and running. Now, you'll want to add it to your startup scripts. There are two ways to run Apache automatically. One is to put it in inetd, which is insane, because that means anytime, if you have it in inetd like Finger and Telnet and all the other things, inetd is always out there listening. Somebody comes to your web server and wants something, it forks an entire copy of Apache. So if you have 5 requests, you have 5 copies of Apache running. That's insane. But you can do it that way if you really want. The other way is to make it a part of the startup script so it's automatically running, and it will sit and listen on a port by itself. Okay. That was 1.3. I'm going to talk a little bit about installing 2.0, the differences. I can't emphasize enough that this is beta software. It's nasty. It's non-trivial. I would avoid it until it becomes a release, unless you want to play around. You can't do modPerl and PHP 4 with it right now, as far as I can tell. I haven't been able to make them run yet. And the documentation is pretty much non-existent. I've got some emails into people asking for some help, and that's about all it is. If you want to do it, you get the tarball, and this is the command that you issue to configure. You tell it where to put it, you give it the prefix, and for Apache 2, the default prefix, the suggested prefix is Apache 2. They want to make sure, that way you can have both running at the same time, both on your tree at the same time. Enable modules most, and this is a new command. With npm, that's all about adding, one of the things that 2.0 has added is the ability to thread, to have threads. You have to tell it which you want to use. Do you want to use threaded, pre-fork, or per child? We'll get to that in a minute, exactly which one you should choose and what they mean. Then you type make install. Okay, the npms. Pre-fork is basically what you got with 1.3. Parent process creates a set of child processes that are ready to serve a request. Each child process has one thread and can serve only one request at a time. When a server gets busy, it spawns a new child process to increase the number of requests that can be handled. That's how Apache works now. With threaded, it's similar to that, except that each child has a static number of threads set at runtime. And then there's per child. That's where the parent process creates a specified number of child processes, each with a minimal number of threads. As the server gets busy, the processes create more threads to handle heavier traffic. Which one's better? Your mileage may vary. Depends on what operating system you're using, what version, if you're using Unix, what version of Unix you're using. If you're using Linux, which one. Since Linux can't handle, or Linux to Linux, threads and processes is the same at the kernel level, you do pre-fork and you don't worry about it. If you're running Solaris, I haven't decided for my Solaris boxes which ones I'm going to run. I'll probably run threaded, but I'm not sure yet. I'm going to test them out first. If you're using npms and CGI, and when you're in 2.0 and you're using CGI scripts, there are a few things you have to know. If you're using pre-fork, if you're using Linux, that's what you're going to use. You should use mod CGI, which is the way it's handled in 1.3. If you're using threaded or per child, you use the new one, which is called mod CGID, which creates a CGI daemon running in Apache. The reason is that when a threaded process forks to create a child process, in the threaded ones, all of the threads are created in the child process, and then it kills off all of those threads except one. So it creates all of them and kills them. It creates all of them and then kills them. That's really not very good for performance. And so they've come up with mod CGID with this nifty Ryan Bloom, who is the god of Apache 2.0. Did this one for Apache today. Apache parent starts the daemon when it starts up. So you've got a CGI daemon running. Apache child processes are spawned at startup, so they're sitting out there. The user makes a CGI request to the child. The child sends the request to the daemon. The daemon spawns the CGI program and child process back to the user. Yeah?
Could you give a definition of a daemon?
A daemon is a program that is constantly running and listening. And when something happens that it should do something about, it does something about it. It's constantly running. It doesn't have to be fired up each time. It's a definite advantage. Okay, a little bit more on Apache 2. Once you've done the configure and you've made it, you've installed it, you run the Apache control start script, and you have Apache 2 up and running. I've only had this work once. But that's what you get for beta software. Okay, now let's talk about Apache configuration. Am I doing on time? Oh, pretty good. Apache configuration. Once upon Apache, for those of you who don't know, Apache came from the old NCSA server, which is one of the first web servers made, which wasn't kept up, and they kept issuing patches for it. And so eventually they decided to make a new one of all those patches, and they called it the Apache server. The NCSA server was controlled by three configuration files: HTTPD, SRM, and access. They've decided, when they did Apache, they decided that was stupid, and there's just one file. They basically put all the commands that are in SRM and access and punched them into HTTPD. If you want, you can still run them, and I think that's primarily for people who set up their servers back when they were using NCSA and just haven't redone their configuration files. Just kind of dumb, but let's take a look at one. Okay, this is where I have to. Actually, we'll go back. We'll take a look at it later. It's actually easier to do this first. Let's talk about tuning Apache. You want to make Apache faster. First thing you do is turn off hostname lookups. I cannot tell you how much faster that will make your machine. Hostname lookups, if you have it enabled, every time someone comes into your site, it does a DNS query to see what that person's or what that machine's name is, so that your log files look real pretty. So instead of seeing a bunch of numbers, you see domains. If you're just looking at your log files, straight log files, I suppose that could be useful. I don't know anybody who does that anymore. Most people use something like Analog or WebStats or something like that, which will go out and take that IP and do the reverse name lookup for you when it creates its little report to you, which doesn't slow down Apache. So turn off hostname lookups. Turn on at the beginning of your root. I'll show you how to do that in the file in just a minute. Turn follow symlinks on in your URL space, and don't use follow symlinks if owners match. Now, this is a security issue. Some people want to be able to follow symlinks, and some people don't want you to be able to follow symlinks. You have to weigh it. If you have it checking, if you don't have symlinks on, or if you have it doing it only if the owners match, Apache makes 2 calls on every item in that item's tree every time it's looked. Yeah?
When you say turn on, are you talking about comment, like?
Yeah, I'll show you. Actually, well, let me, I'm going to have to come back to this real quickly, but let's show you. This is can you read this in the back? Can you guys read this? This is the conf file. And we just as well go through it now. The first part is all explanatory stuff that you can read to explain why they do certain things. Come down here. You can't really see it off to the side here for some reason. There's comment signs going all the way down here. So that none of this stuff has effect. It's just for your information. Here's the first command. Server type standalone. If you're going to run it, not through inetd, if you're going to run it, you have to set this command. That's done automatically. That's the default. Here's the server root command, where you tell it where you put the directory of your server. This is the prefix command in the configuration. You're doing it user local Apache. Lock file. Lock file. If your operating system doesn't handle lock file locking internally, you're telling it where to put the lock file. Linux and Solaris both do it internally, so we don't have to have a log file. So I leave that commented out. The PID file is the process file. When Apache is created, it gets a process ID number. Apache stores that in a file in the logs directory, a file called httpd.pid. That's really useful for when you want to reboot your machine. You can write a little script that reads that number and kills that process. It comes in real handy. Scoreboard file, you can leave as the default. Down here, actually I use this, it's easier. Down here, resource config and access config, those are the other two files. You can't see it, but they're commented off because I'm only using one file. Let's see. Timeout. Number of seconds before it receives something and sends it you. Basically, that's how long in seconds a session is open before it cuts it off. So if a client has come to your server, hits you once, after 300 seconds, if it doesn't hit you again, it drops the connection and the child dies. You can set that to any number. 300 is 5 minutes, which is kind of long. It's probably long enough for anything. I think on my box at home I've got it set for either 60 or 120, so 1 or 2 minutes. Keep alive, you should turn to on, because it's that allows it to keep a persistent connection. Maximum keep alive requests is 100, that's a good number. Keep alive timeout 15. These are all the defaults, you don't have to change them, and they're really pretty good. We'll discuss them a little bit later actually in the slides. Minimum, maximum spare servers. How many servers to start when you start up? The more servers you add to this line, the longer it's going to take your thing to start up when you boot it. But like I said, I boot mine once in 4 months. So it's not really a big issue. The maximum number of clients you can have attached at any one time. 256 is the limit by default in the binary that's built. You can override that. It's not a good idea to, unless you really know what you're doing. It's also not an easy thing to do. You have to get it's a really nasty process to do. The maximum requests per child is another one. That's each child process, how many requests of you can they make? If you set it for 0, it's unlimited. Which is generally a good idea to do, unless you're running Solaris 2.51 or earlier. Solaris 2.51 or earlier had enormous memory leaks. And if you set it to 0, you eventually get into a race condition, and it would shut your machine down. So if you're running that earlier version of Solaris, or anything else where you've got memory leak problems, you set it to 10,000, and then it'll cut it off. So it won't go on so long as to kill your server, which is always nice. You can give it what port and what IP number you want it to listen at on your box. I don't use those. I have those commented out because I use virtual hosts. I set up virtual servers, which is a better way to do it, and I'll show you those in a minute. A little bit farther down in the file. Bind address we don't worry about. DSO support. This is where it looks really nasty. Luckily, you don't really have to deal much with this. These are all the modules. When we did enable module most, it did this for us. It puts all these lines in, basically telling it which modules you can load dynamically. Actually, this is just which modules can be loaded. And here are the add modules. All available modules. Again, they're all there. Actually, here there's two you should know on this load module one. The Perl one was put in. This one is not a part of the standard Apache. It was put in when we did the modPerl installation. And the PHP 4 one was when we did the PHP. That was put in. The same thing down here in the add module commands. Those two right there were added. Extended status. One of the things Apache does is it gives you a server status. You can limit it to certain IP numbers, but basically from anywhere you can check your server. If you use extended status, it slows things down. But it gives you some really nifty stuff, gives you time of day and all some nice stuff. I leave it on because, frankly, with If you've got enough RAM, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't slow you down that much. Okay, main server configuration. A lot of stuff you can just scroll past. This is all just explanation. One of the nice things about this file is that they do take the time to explain what things are, so you can figure it out. Port 80, this command is where you set the port your server is running on. This server is running as the primary web server on this box, so it's at port 80, which is the default. You can set it to 8080, you can set it to, I don't know, 6000 if you wanted. Whatever you want. This is actually fairly important. This is the user and the user's group of the process that runs Apache. What does Apache run on? For security reasons, you want to make sure that, well, for Solaris and for Linux, user nobody is a good one. You can create a user that has no rights as well, but I always use nobody. And on Solaris, group 60001 is the no group. And specify it out that way, just to show you that you can do it either by name or number, group number.
So what would the group be then?
No, it's the group is no group is the name of it. Actually, it has absolutely no rights. it can do nothing but call Apache. Here's where you set your webmaster address, so that if your box goes nuts, somebody can get to you. This is obviously the East Jesus University website and for Tom. So we set it for www.eju. Let's see what else is there. Server name, this is where you set the name of your box. This is the document root command is where you put, this tells you where, when you hit that web server, your document root is, where the top of it is. You specify it out. I use the standard htdocs under Apache because that's what everybody uses. Okay, now we start to get directory permissions. These little baskets allow you to put commands to cover certain things. Like here, we're talking about a directory. We want everything in this little basket to apply to this directory, which is the root directory. It's not the root directory on the box, it's the root directory of Apache, which is what user local Apache. You're telling it you want no options. You don't want to allow anybody to override with an htaccess file. The order of acceptance or denial of access is deny, then allow, and you're denying from everybody. Basically, nobody has access unless you're the root user or somebody with permission. But coming in over the web, nobody has access to the root. Then you allow. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. That is the user for the. That is the directory. That is the root for the box. I'm sorry. It's been a long day. This is the one for the root of the Apache server. Deny, allow from all. Let's go on here a little bit. Now we do the directory for where you've got your web root, where all your documents are. I allow in this box a lot of stuff. Options. I allow indexes, following symlinks, includes, server-side includes, and XCGI, just for the hell of it.
XCGI in the root, or in your
on this box, this was a test box that I got this off of, and we were doing some stuff with CGI and playing around, and it was also sort of the security through obscurity. Nobody knew where the box was, which is stupid, but we did it anyway. We do allow overrides. Actually, on several of my boxes, I do allow overrides, but the only override I allow in the htaccess file is offconfig, which allows me to control who has access to that particular directory, and is very useful. Who can get stuff? Anybody can get stuff off this server. I have also enabled, and this can be a mistake, I've enabled public HTML directories for users. On this box, there are only a few users, which I've actually had fun with. Heywood, Bruce, Ryan, Masters, and Ethel, the Wonder Yak, which is actually an alias for Elmer. Yeah, just joking. These are, on this box, these are sysadmin types. And so I've allowed them to have their own directories because I can trust them. You should only do this for people you trust. So we've enabled it. What this does is it disables user directories in general. So everything is disabled. Then it specifically disables root. You don't want root to have this. It can compromise things. Then you enable them specifically for specific individual users. That's the safest way to do it. Now, in these directories, which is what this directory basket covers, we allow them to do all kinds of things, including symlinks. They can play, they can do basically anything they want. Okay, directory index. This is where you tell it what's the file that should be used as the index file. You can use, you could just put directory index, and then anything that started with index would be used. That's a mistake because it takes a lot of process time. It adds extra cycles to the process. It's much better to specify all the different individual file names that you could possibly use. Here we're using HTML, HTM, SHTML, and PHP because those are the only kind of files we have as index files. And when we're talking about access files, this is where you set the name of the access file. .htaccess. You can change it to whatever you want. Some people use .security. I just use htaccess because then I'll remember what it is. In those we allow and deny, and we deny from all. We don't worry about caching negotiated documents. We use the canonical name. MIME types, don't really have to worry about. This is all set up by default. You can pretty much leave it. Hostname lookups, when I was talking about hostname lookups, that's where you turn it off. You just type the word off. And actually, I think now it comes, Apache 1.2 had that on by default, I think. It now comes with it off by default. Okay, logs. Logs are very important. So the error log, this tells this is actually the default error log. Tells you where it is. You can set what level, what kind of things you want logged. I've got it set at warning. You could go higher or lower. Warning seems to be a good enough level for the error log for me. This is a custom log. Some log formats for different types of log entries. I generally just accept the default because when you accept the default, things like analog will work without too much trouble. Use the custom log format. Let's see here. Anything else here that's important? Icons. You don't really worry about icons unless you really want. I have fancy directory turned on because when I do get a directory, I like it to have little icons on it because it looks kind of cool. I know it's dumb, but okay. Script aliases. We require, on most of my boxes, require all CGI scripts to be in a single directory where we can control them. This is where you set what that directory is. It's CGI bin, and you set its alias at CGI bin so that anybody can call it by just you put a script. You can stick it anywhere as long as you tell it here, and that way they'll come up. We allow no overrides in that directory, no options, and we allow anybody to look at it. Redirect, we don't really use that much. I think Tom uses it a lot. Index options, fancy indexing, because I like that. These are all the different add icon types. I mean, as you can see, you can do a lot of customization. You don't have to do a lot of customization. You can just accept defaults on a lot of this stuff. So what kind of icons will pop up for what? I add a few extra descriptions that aren't put in by default. I put in GZ files, tar GZ files, and PHP files, just so that people know what they are. If it pops up, it gives an explanation. This part right here, if it sees a GZ file in the directory, it will explain it as a gzip compressed file. It's a nice thing to do for people. This stuff is just padding through. Languages. tells you what the different languages you can accept in. I set a priority of English, French, and Dutch. We have nothing on ours. Actually, we do have Spanish on ours. I probably should put Spanish up there. Here's where you add the PHP type. We talked about you had to add PHP. This is where you do. I also add PHP source because I like to display source code. This is a test server, so I like to do that. CGI scripts. If you're going to use server parsed, if you want to use server-side includes, you add type text HTML .shtml, telling it basically anything that ends in .shtml. Any file that ends in that, you should run server-side include on. We also use what's called the XBit hack, which is really kind of fun. It allows you to do server-side includes on any file that has the execute bit checked off on it, and it's permissions mask, or permissions. It's file permissions. It slows it down a bit because you're running everything through server-side includes that has the execute bit, but it makes a lot. So it solves a lot of people asking you what the hell HTML is. Yeah, people don't understand. Makes it look a little cleaner. Let's see. Let's get to the good stuff. The difficult stuff. You know, I got a page down button. This is where, for server status, I don't want anybody in the world seeing my server status. So I set a location server status thing where I deny from all and allow only from the my local subnet, which actually for this box we set it at EJU. Let's see, anything else that looks interesting? Okay, virtual host. This is where Apache really comes into its own. You can set up all kinds of virtual hosts on Apache. I've got one IP number. You can have multiple IP numbers if you've got multiple cards. Or if you have control of your own DNS, which I don't. I have one IP number, and I have 3 different... Actually, on this box, we kind of futzed around with it. There are 2 or 3 different websites that have unique URLs. They all resolve to the same IP number, because I got one card in the box. You set up virtual hosting. The first thing you do is you set the name virtual host. We're doing it by IP number because that's what I've got. The IP number, 198.162.100.20 on port 80. That's what it's going to listen for. You set that there. Then, come down here. Not way too far. Sorry about this. Just do it this way. It's safer. This is a commented out one. This is the first one we've got. Okay, it's listening on that port. It's listening for www.eju.edu. This is where you set the document root for that particular server. You can set the webmaster's address. You tell it what you want the error log called and what you want the access log called. Now this is the same as the stuff that was up above, because when you do this kind of virtual hosting, you basically repeat it because you're setting it. You have to set yourself up as a virtual host as well. So that's pretty much identical. The next one, what if we had the library's website on the same box? Well, it's www.library.eju.edu. You just tell it where you want it. It has a different error log, has a different access log, so you can run your statistics on the different boxes. It's on your same box. It's in the same basic subdirectory system. But people entering that URL get in there without a problem.
So you don't have to give it a different forward number or anything like that?
Nope. And here we've got one for, what if you had a professor who had his own largego.com site? We actually had one who wanted his own. So you set up www.largego.com. It's pointing to your same IP number. You set up all the stuff and you can administer it. And that's the end of the conf file. It's actually not too bad. Now let's go back to end the presentation here. Oh, I'm going to have to... Star Impress and Star Office has come a long way. It's a lot better than it used to be, but there are times when I miss PowerPoint. Part of it is I haven't taken the time to really learn this either. It does things a bit differently.
How would you install a module for MySQL and for Perl if you're running most of your CPIs through Perl?
Actually, you don't really install a MySQL module. You enable MySQL support. What that does is it allows MySQL to control your access to files and stuff. It's one of the things you can do. You can do it with MSQL as well. Let's see here. We'll get through this fairly quickly. Get back to where we were. Sorry about this. Okay, we're talking. Yeah, we get to that point. Okay. Tuning Apache. If you allow overrides, Apache will try to open your htaccess files for every directory. I need to do it. I need to be able to control by directory who gets what. So I take that trade-off. Another thing in tuning is to avoid content negotiation if you want the absolute fastest speed. But content negotiation is one of the really neat things you can do with Apache. Like remember I was saying, the directory, if you use just index, it takes so many extra hits. You set everything off. That content negotiation is really useful to have. Start servers. Remember we're going through the list in that file. Explain a little bit of them here. Start servers defaults at 5. That's a really good place to leave it. Minimum spare servers also defaults at 5. Apache really does a good job of making enough spare. You don't really have to worry about it. But if you are getting sites with if you get a site with millions of hits, set it up a little bit higher, like 32 or so. Spare servers default at 10. That's good enough. Clients defaults at 256, and that's a decent amount. Max request per child, we covered. Extended status, we covered. Keep alive, timeout. Okay. Wrap this up as we're almost out of time. These are the places where you can get the source code. Go there, download it. It's easy. Other resources. Apache Today and Apache Week are both really good e-zines. I subscribe to both of them. They're free. A lot of tips, a lot of the stuff, especially the stuff on Apache 2.0, that's where it's coming first. Ryan Bloom writes for both of them, and he's the guy doing the runtime abstraction layer, and he writes really well, and it's actually fairly useful. They'll also tell you on a regular basis, when the new version comes out, which is nice. For Apache 1.3, there is nothing out in press for Apache 2 yet. For Apache 1.3, this is the best book I've come across, by far. Well, not by far. It's the best book I've come across. The O'Reilly book is also really good. It's not quite as in-depth as the other one. And for tuning, Web Performance Tuning, it's also an O'Reilly book, is really great, whether you're running Apache or anything else, really. It takes you a little bit outside the server. You want to speed things up. Here's some other things you can do as well. Like one of his suggestions is get a larger pipe. If you're having a lot of trouble and you've configured everything else and everything's still running slow, get a T3. Go up a notch. Whereas Emerald Lagasse would say, kick it up a notch. And that's pretty much it. Any questions? Anybody awake?
I'm awake.
Yeah.
Actually, not a question, but a comment. You can also get, there is a really good version, at least a version that I like, of Apache that runs on Win2K, WinNT, Windows 98. And that's from newsphere.com. It's NUSPHERE. You get Apache, MySQL, PHP, and Perl. They all work. It's 23 meg download. and you can get it for free and install it. It takes about, well, however long it takes to download, and it takes about 5 minutes to install, and it works really well. And I use it as a development platform for stuff because I don't run Linux on my desktop. Sorry. Well, you know, there's just not enough cool. Well,
He wants to run DVDs on his desktop.
yeah. But Newsphere works really well. The latest version actually includes the SSL-enabled Apache, so you can have secure encrypted
Sure.
web access from your desktop in case you know you got something you want to do with that.
Anybody else? Yeah.
How do you administer something like that remotely?
Sure.
You mentioned server status.
Sure.
How do you do that?
When you set up the server status, you tell it if you're going to be coming from a particular place. You don't want everybody to have access to that. But if you know you're coming from, you know, if you've got a fixed IP address or a fixed range of IP addresses, you can set that in that basket. You can tell it what IP numbers you want it to listen to. And then you type in the URL to the box /server-status.
What do you get back?
You get back, I wish I actually had Apache running on the laptop right now because I'd show you. You get back how long it's been up, how many child requests are up, what's the maximum number of child processes you had spawned, all kinds, basic stuff like that.
But you're basically telling logs.
No, web. Point your browser at it.
Yeah. And you can start and stop the server now.
No. You can't start and stop the server. For that, you have to use SSH. I wouldn't tell that. I think Tom would agree with that, right, Tom?
Absolutely.
When you telnet into something across the network, your password's unencrypted. So, now, I have a question for you guys. How many of you have been here for all 5 GeekFest, I refuse to call it TeknoidFest, sessions? Did you raise your hands?
You know, for past 2 days,
Yeah, for the past 2 days. There have been 5 of them.
I would have been glad to speak.
No, you have to be here for all 5. Okay, those of you guys holding up your hands, we have decided that since this was the last one on Saturday, if you read my conference description, it said fabulous prizes. Originally it was supposed to be caffeine mints, but I was threatened not to allow caffeine mints anywhere near Mr. Ryan. I was threatened with bodily harm, actually, by Elmer, among others. And so we came up with another idea. I have a wonderful geek shirt. Extra large, ultra cotton heavyweight. It says geek on the front and geek on the back. Pick a number between 1 and 100. There are 3 of you.
Very good.
There's 3 people who've been here, or 4. You've been here through all of them.
Yeah, but I don't want it.
You-
Sorry, somebody else again.
Okay, whoever has been here for all 3, or for all 5, pick a number between 1 and 100.
16.
12.
She got it, exactly. There you go. See you guys later.
Okay, now we'll clap for John.